Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another show of Inspirate Business, the show that's here to inspire you, to empower you, and to enlighten you. Today, on our hot couch, we have none other than somebody that I have been chasing for a long time to get onto this hot couch. A brother who I have a lot of respect for. I've been watching his movements on social media. We have had the honor of meeting a few times. Brother Tahir Muhammad Maepa, welcome to the Inspirate Show.
Thank you very much for having me. It's quite a pleasure to be here with you.
Yes, and I know you are a very busy man, so it has been difficult to get you. You're doing some amazing work, somebody that's very, very passionate about the South African context and doing practical things to change the dynamics of our people. And we're going to go through this over the next hour and discuss, some of our challenges. What can we do differently? Now, Tahir, we met in a context in the north of Pretoria, at Winterveld, yes. Our brother Sheikh Rahim's center, which I know you're actively involved in. You are a Pretoria boy.
Yes. I'm born in and raised in Pretoria. I'm from Soshanguve, Block F West. I was raised there. I went to my primary school in Soshanguve and my high school in Soshanguve. So most of my life, I've spent it in Soshanguve, basically, and the surrounding areas, Mabopane, Winterveld, and those areas.
Okay, so you quite, is that where the whole link with Rahim is and the Winterveld Center?
Yes, that's most of because of my upbringing. In fact, Rahim is quite younger than me.
Right.
I've always seen him as my little brother. In fact, the first person that I interacted with in his family was his mother.
Okay. It was a big influence in his life.
Yes. Soul rest in peace. She's the one. She used to have this center at her home where she's doing feedings and madrasa and all those kinds of things. So that's how I started interacting. And Rahim then was a little youngster growing up to be the giant that he is today. So it was quite a valuable experience for myself, for my own personal sojourn as a Muslim, but also as an activist, as a community activist. So it was a great influence. Yeah.
So I want to talk a little bit about that activism, and as well as you mentioned this Muslim journey. So you were not born Muslim, right? No. So you embraced Islam. At what age did you embrace Islam?
I embraced Islam when I was about 21 years old.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how old are you now?
I'm now 48.
48.
So
okay.
Yes, yeah. So it's been quite a while since I've embraced Islam, and obviously my embracing Islam, it was more pushed by my activism, because activism is one of those areas where you serve your fellow humans and you start looking at life a little bit differently. And when I bumped into Islam, and I must say that I bumped into Islam, it augured well with what I was doing, looking at the lives of the Prophet and the Sahabas, the way Islam basically gradually came to being. It was not an easy, rosy road. They had to go through quite difficulties. And every time when I go through these difficulties in my life, I always cross-reference, say, I'm not the first one who's been through this. This is the journey of a believer, is a journey of an activist, somebody who wants the best for other human beings. Our path is a thorny road, so we tend to accept the reality of that thorniness, to say that if you want to serve and you want to be pleasing to Allah, you'll have to go through these things. So long as you are sincere, eventually, gradually, you will either achieve that in this life or, alhamdulillah, in the next.
In the next life.
Yeah.
And this is very, very powerful because I think I've also, and for the viewers out there as well, that, whatever challenges you're going through, and I think we have this example, and you're saying this, is that in the Prophet's life, Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam's life, is that it's a life of struggle. And yet that was the example. Allah could have made it that the greatest man to walk this earth would have been given a soft life, but it wasn't. He had the largest struggles from the time he was born as an orphan, and all the struggles, banished by his own family, his own tribe, and then creates the Medina model, which becomes the example for the world. You know, so that, you say, is where you cross-referencing. Now coming back to your life as a youngster. So you were quite active at the time, in the fiery time of South African fighting against this injustice of apartheid, a real injustice. Tell me a little bit about that, and how did you, what reared you into this whole activism?
Look, I became actively involved in politics when I was about 14 years.
Okay.
When I went to high school, it was during the times, it was in the 80s.
Right.
Now, the 80s were very volatile because the country was changing. And there was this awakening in the country where we are able to mention Nelson Mandela as a form of resistance, because mentioning him was a jail term.
Yes.
But I grew up in a point where we were talking about this man, Ahmed Kathrada, Oltasi Sulu, and all these heroes that we had. But what really changed me the most, when I went to high school, I met a guy that was coming from the Israel, and he was quite a strange guy. And he was from the PAC, Pan-Africanist Congress. And we grew up under the ANC, the UDF leadership. Father Smangaliso Mkashwa, for instance, he was our mentor. We at the Roman Catholic Church, that's where we were going there for our lessons about the struggle, what is happening, and we're hearing about these sacrifices that our elderlies are doing and all that. And that used to really charge us up. And it was that passion for change that was driving us. And in fact, there was a time when I was in high school, I thought, I'm not even going to finish school. We must just go and fight and get this thing done with. And now when I met this guy, and I used to listen to him, but he was a loner. And he started telling me about people like Robert Sobukwe and all those kinds of people. And, you know, it was my first interaction with the Pan-Africanist Congress ideology as a growing youngster. I always knew about the UDF, the African National Congress, and so forth. And when I read about the story of this man and what he went through, and the fact that he was part of the ANC, they split with the ANC because of fundamental differences.
You're talking about Robert Sobukwe?
Robert Sobukwe.
Yes.
Fundamental difference in terms of the approach to our struggle. And later in life now, I realized that Robert Sobukwe was right. Because what we are struggling with now is what he was saying, let's resolve that then, the issue of land. And now we are sitting in this quandary where we don't know whether we're coming or going. And I started being a follower of this guy now. In fact, in my township in Soshanguve, in Block F West, I was the only known PAC supporter. And it was quite strange because nobody really understood what is wrong with me. You know, people will say Amang, and I would say Izwele, you know.
Right.
But that in itself fashioned my outlook in terms of Africanism. Because Robert Sobukwe was not a racist. He was simply saying that, you know what, as human beings, you either treat us as equals or we are going to be adversaries, and it ends there. But we have a choice to take this route that is in the best interest of everybody. But before we even go there, give us what is ours. And if we decide to share with you some of it, it becomes our choice. So that's what basically channeled me. Now, as a youngster, I grew up in a very staunch Christian family. I was raised by my grandmother. And with my grandmother, you'd go to church every Sunday. You know, during Easter, you'd go to church from Friday evening to Monday morning. You know, she was that kind. So I grew up in a very religious household. But now, as I get interaction with the political system of the country, one thing that always worried me is that our white people are also Christians. But why do they hate us? Why do they treat us like this?
Mhm.
When we read the same book, we believe in the same God and all. And it worried me. But I could not grasp this. And my grandmother, she was not going to change, you know. And I was not going to question her. I loved her and she raised me to be the man that I am today. So I sort of drifted away from religion. I think for a moment I was an atheist. I didn't want to believe in God. I believed in God, but I didn't pray. I didn't follow a particular way of life in terms of religious. Now, my childhood friend, when we finished matric, he went to study medicine, then Medunsa.
Yeah, right.
In
That was the
Garambua,
famous
in Medical
Medunsa,
University of
yes.
South Africa. I went to Rau.
Okay.
Now, during recess, school holidays, we never used to like to go home. So he would get keys from one of his friends there and we'll move in Medunsa and we'll stay there and all that. But he was also a staunch Christian. Even under those circumstances, Sunday he would want to go to church. And I would say, but I'm not going to church. I don't believe in those things anymore. So one of the days he then comes to me and say, you know what? I know you. I grew up with you. Whatever that worries you with Christianity, let's leave it aside. But why don't you try this? Then he gave me a book by Ahmed Didat. Now, there were youngsters in Medunsa, Indian, they were doing dawah and they were giving out these books. And he tended to pick up one of these books. I think the title of the book was The God That Was Not or something like that. I don't remember the title of the book. And
Tahir, okay, look, let's continue the conversation. Yeah. We've come to the end of the first segment.
Okay.
And Tahir is sharing with us this remarkable story of his activism, his rearing by being a different from the rest in terms of the struggle. A loner in that sense as well, because being a PAC activist at the time with your thinking was different to the mainstream activism, as much as we were still fighting the evil apartheid system. But it was a different approach to it. And his journey then as being born a staunch Christian, reared by his grandmother, but finding that there's a dichotomy between the same God that we following, yet we're coming from different points of departure. So let's explore then, picking up this book from Ahmed Didat and what happens next after the break. Welcome back to Inspirate Business, where we have none other than Tahir Muhammad Maepa. This very suave man, I must say, looking always very, very distinguished, I must say. And, Tahir is sharing with us his journey. Now, let's just carry on this very, very powerful point that you were talking about. You at university, you now at a point where you're not really practicing your Christian beliefs. And a friend of yours gives you a book by the late Ahmed Didat.
Yes. Now, when he gave me that book, obviously I looked at it. I said, but the ignorance then, from my point of view, said, but what do I do with a Indian religion? I ran away from my religion, and now you give me. He says, no, read that book. Then I said, no, okay, fine, I'll read it. But I never read the book. Then months later, I was at home, then I picked up this book, and then I started reading. Now, the thing is with Ahmed Didat, he liked doing this comparative religion, and he did it so nicely because you can cross-reference from both sides.
But the Bible,
but I didn't have the Quran,
right?
But I had the Bible,
right?
So he mentioned some of the contradictions in the Bible, how the Bible was changed and all those kinds of things. Now, that triggered something in my mind. He says, okay, if the Bible was changed, it means that it was changed for a particular purpose. now it makes sense why these people are treating us in this fashion. Because if it was in its original state, we would have been brothers, But it sort of intrigued me. Then I went to the Bible. At first I thought that this is propaganda. I mean, you get propaganda material all over the place. Then I got my Bible and then I looked and I found all those verses in the Bible. I said, no, man, this can't be true. And now he cross-reference to what the Quran is saying. I don't have the Quran. Then I said, what am I going to do now? Then one Saturday, I went for classes in town. I happened to pass by Queen Street. There's a Queen Street mosque, the oldest mosque, I think, in Pretoria.
Yes, in Pretoria.
Pretoria, yeah.
It's very close to all the government
buildings and all that.
Public works is there. And
exactly.
Transport, yeah.
So it's
actually a very beautiful building.
It's a very beautiful building. Now, next to it, there was a De Brain Park. At the bottom of the Brain Park, there used to be Indian restaurants. So I like going to eat curries there.
Yes.
So one day I said, no, man, let me go into this church of the Indians. I go in. When I go in, I find this imam. I ask him, I tell him that I'm so and so and so and so. I give him this book that I got one of your books from a friend. I'm having few questions. He look at the book and he smiles. Then he says, okay, come to the office. Then I go to the office and say, it's time for us to pray. You either wait for me here or you can come with me and pray. I said, no, I don't want to go in with you. You can go and you'll find me here. Then he goes in and pray. Then I go out, I follow him. As they're praying, I look at them, the manner in which they're praying and all those kinds of things. Then they come out. Then we sit. And I say to him, but why do you have to wash before you go and pray? Why do you have all these facilities? I mean, I go to church, I pray, I wash at home, and then I go to church. And then he started explaining me the concept of wudu. And wudu, the way he explained it to me, it's not washing. You are basically preparing yourself for salah. It's like you purifying yourself. You preconditioning your mind for that surrender, But the manner in which he explained it really touched me because I never look at it from that point of view. Washing for me, it was washing.
Yes,
I want to be clean.
Yes,
that's the reason why I'm washing.
Yes.
So then he says, okay, let's go back to this book. I'm a co-author of this book. He says Ahmed Deedat was. I used to work for Ahmed Deedat. His name is Imam Saeed. So I know this man very well, and I co-authored some of his books and all that. So if you want to ask about, I can tell you everything. I'm from IPC, I think, and I grew up in Durban and all that. I'm now here. I'm an imam here. I said, now Imam Saeed, it was one of those. He was quite young, but he was very articulative, and he understood the politics of today. He was not just an ordinary imam that tells you about Salah and all those kinds of things. He understood the environment, and I could relate to him, Then I started engaging. Every Saturday I was with that man. Every Saturday I was with that man. Then one Monday or Tuesday, I went and say, I want to become a Muslim.
And he's a South African.
He's a South African born Indian.
Yeah, okay.
But from Durban. He said, I want to become a Muslim. He says, why do you want to become a Muslim? I said to him, I love the justice of your religion. The only thing that attracts me is the justice. The way Prophet Muhammad behaved, treated people and all that. Black and white. The story of Bilal, I don't want to go into that.
Yes.
I mean, he took me through all those things, And after verifying that those are historical facts, I said, then this makes perfect sense. Because God cannot be just and be discriminatory in the same breath. It doesn't work like that. So he said, you're sure about this thing? I said, I'm sure I want. That's how then I embraced Islam. But look at the road. It was a Christian who brought me to Islam. And the material that he gave me, it sends me to a person who was involved, who authored that.
Unbelievable. Yeah. And this is Allah's, this is where we say there's no such thing as coincidence.
No, there's not at all.
Allah's grandiose plan of getting you to where you needed to be.
Exactly.
And I mean, we're sitting here today now talking about this, right? If it wasn't for that. Now, okay, so you now embrace Islam, right? You obviously carrying on with life. What happens after you're studying? You did
I did law.
Right.
I did labor law with Johannesburg University,
Okay.
then Rau, and then I did also a diploma in business management.
Okay.
Initially, when I was growing up, I just saw myself as a manager in a bank and all that.
Yes,
I just wanted to. So, but that also helped me in terms of understanding business etiquette.
Right.
I've never considered myself to be a business person, an entrepreneur, yes. But my entrepreneurship was not necessarily based on making money. I've never made money out of my entrepreneur work, but I've created opportunities for people.
Okay.
So even when I started working, I always did entrepreneur work, and I would get people in, and literally every cent that I get out of that business was paying people. And that helped me to cement my love to serve other people. Mm-hmm. So whilst I was doing the business management course with a private college in Pretoria, then I met a guy. We were in the same class. He was from the Northern Cape. Mm. He was with Azanian People's Liberation Movement.
Yeah, Azapo.
Yeah. Mm. And now that's another enlightenment into the geopolitics of the country.
Right.
And every Saturday would also meet and go to their offices in town. Mm. But in the Azapo offices, they also had unions from different sectors, But Azapo guys were intelligent, man. They were different, very intelligent guys, analytical, and when they reason, it's like they forever reading. And they don't just talk. They also back up what they're saying, whether it's science or whether it doesn't matter what it is, with literature to say that, you know what, and they will give you books that read this book about this and then understand, and an introduction about Steve Biko, the life of Steve Biko and all that. That in itself, sort of, it's part of my fashioning to say that the path that I'm taking is the correct one. Then one of the guys at the trade union movement, he said, when are you finishing with your studies? I said, I'm finishing the end of this year. He says, come and work with us. And I said, hey, I want to be a manager, man. I want to go. I mean, I didn't know that being a manager is not just you have a degree or a qualification, you become a manager. You have to go through all sorts of things. But when I started working with these guys, they had 700 members. In the it was a public service union, but it was just before 1994, and then ANC was strong, COSATU unions were strong. Yes. I remember even Nelson Mandela saying that he's going to join NEHAWU. So he was cementing that narrative. Everybody loved Mandela. So if Mandela is going to be a member of NEHAWU, so everybody must be a member of NEHAWU. So our work was cut off in terms of being a trade union. So, but I worked with these guys. There was no money, would get paid at the end of the month. And then the following Monday, the general secretary would say, guys, can I borrow some of that money? We need to pay rent. But I loved what I was doing. So I worked with these guys and, we were growing slowly. Then one day I said to this guy, you know what? Recruiting workers one by one is going to take us a long time. Why don't we recruit unions? He says, how do you can't recruit the union. Union is it's a persona by itself. It's registered and all this, got its rights and obligations and all that. I said, no, COSATU unions are going to destroy us. They are growing and they are becoming too powerful. And once they establish themselves properly, they are going to close the door for any other union to enter into the bargaining arena. And if we can't go into the bargaining arena, we are finished, we'll close shop. Then we looked around and there were unions that come from the previous Bantu stands. Bophuthatswana, Ciskei, Transkei, and all that. I said, let's approach these guys. We went to these unions and we spoke to them and we agreed to merge. And we formed a union called NUPSO. Then by getting everybody together, we had about 65,000 members at the go.
Mm.
And they all agreed. There was Indian unions from KZN, a colored union from the Western Cape,
Yes.
from Limpopo. There was one from Eastern Cape and all that. Then we came together and we formed this group. So then I became their first national organizer because I came with this idea.
With the idea, yes.
Of then we coordinate. That's how I basically came into the trade union movement.
Wow, what a journey to get there. But you know what comes out very strongly from that is that you had to be innovative.
Yes.
And I think this is a great lesson for us as well in the context that we live in today. That I think if you carry on doing the same old, you're not going to get
not going to
You
progress.
have to be thinking outside the box. There you had COSATU at the time. I mean, who in that time of that 94 dispensation,
Yes,
you just think of those pictures. Yeah. Those that can remember, these were like swarms of people. COSATU was the union. How do you go up against this giant?
Yes.
And you had to think outside the box. Took these smaller entities from the old Bantustan entities and created 65,000 strong
union.
And okay, so what we come to now, the end of this segment. What I would like to do is after the break is let's explore now your role as a unionist, how that reared you. I know you've created now recently another union and the work that you're doing. And let's also look at our current context.
Yes.
South Africa today, it has many, many, many challenges, as we know.
Yes.
What can we do differently based on this beautiful experience of yours, how you came, from into Islam with the strong concept that you say that what brought you to Islam was justice. Today, we're grappling with that very, very same issue. This justice, which is still a major challenge for us, not only in South Africa, but the world we live in,
yes.
and becoming even a bigger problem immediately after the break. Welcome back to Inspirate Business, the show that's here to inspire you, to empower you, and to enlighten you. And boy, are we having a great experience here. It's so refreshing, Brother Tahir, Muhammad, Maepa, to have you on our hot couch, sponsored by Aza Collective. It's just blending so nicely with this, with the class and the style. Yeah, but a beautiful journey. With this concept that brought you to Islam, this of justice. Now, you could have had a different path. With your studying and whatever, you could have been in the bank, been a corporate animal, in a very different path that you're taking. But there's something I pick up in you in this whole concept of caring for the downtrodden. And I guess that's why you got into the union type of work. It's a tougher environment. Yeah. I mean, you could have joined. You think of it also at the time in the struggle. You could have joined the mainstream struggle,
the popular
which was
narrative,
the mass democratic movement at the time, with the UDF and the ANC. You went again with the PAC, then with AZAPO. Now you create a union that's against the grain, which was COSATU. All right. You are for the marginalized. I picked that up very strongly. Today we have, sadly, this large marginalized, the globe over. You see the stats getting even greater, this gap between the haves and the have-nots. Some people may feel very disillusioned and say, is it ever going to change? How do we eradicate poverty? Can it be eradicated? How do we get this marginalized into mainstream economy? Talk of the issue of land. So tell us a little bit about, now you have created your own union as well, a public service union. And what do you guys aim to do with it? How do we change this current environment we're in globally and in South Africa?
Yeah. One of the things that have always been a driver for me is to say that we are very capable of looking after the downtrodden of our society. We have the resources to do that. We have the capability to do that. We just don't have the will to do it. And one of the things, going back to my experience with NUPSO, and I'm happy that happened so early in my life. Remember, I told you that there were times when we were getting paid on a Friday, and on a Monday they would borrow our salaries. Now money started coming in. I remember sometime in the early 90s, we signed an agreement called a levy agreement in the PSCBC. Now that agreement basically said that anybody who's not unionized is going to pay a fee. And then that money is going to be put together and it's going to be distributed amongst the unions who are at the PSCBC. And that's what is millions. Even today, it's still millions. Now, the first chunk of that money, it was a lot. Then they started distributing this money amongst these unions. I mean, COSATU obviously got the chunk of the money. We got few millions as well. Then the guys that we used to share sparkle with, they started changing. Greed started coming in. Mistreatment started coming in. And there's one thing, I don't know whether I'm saying it works against me. The moment I see injustice, I revolt immediately. And it has gotten me into trouble, and that's what got me into trouble with my previous employers. Then we had squabbles within the union. But I said to myself, you know what? This is, money of the workers is the money of the poor. It's like zakat. Yes. Once you consume that money maliciously, it will come back to bite you one day. Then I decided to leave. Because by then, I was growing in the organization. In fact, I was elected to be the Deputy General Secretary of that union in the same year when all these things started happening. Then I walked away. And an opportunity then came to be a mineral export consultant. I had a stint in UAE in one of the Emirates called Al Kuwait. But now, what is nice about that what I studied in business management helped me to understand this part of the world, which I haven't experienced, It's like going back to my notes in terms of how you run a business, how you become, how do you structure contracts and all those kinds of things. And that helped me because in the union space, we're not making money. So that helped me. When I came back from UAE, I had a little bit of money. I could get married and buy a house.
How many years were you in the UAE?
My contract lasted for 2.5 years.
Okay. It must have been a great experience for you.
It was. Going up and down and on all those kinds of things. So when I came back, I said, you know what, whatever little that I made, it's going to be exhausted. I need to get a job. Then I said, you know what, I don't want to go back to where I come from. Maybe let me try and be a servant, go to government. And I managed to get an opportunity. Then I worked for Department of Home Affairs.
Okay.
And then I worked for a section called Duplicate Section. So I was investigating duplicate fraudulent IDs. That was my division. But now, when I was there, I had to now prosecute people who are doing fraud, who are fraudulently issuing IDs in the Department of Home Affairs, something that I'm not accustomed to. But because of my experience as a union in defending the workers, I'm able to do this work. And I used to make sure that I give people a fair opportunity to get their act right. But what frustrated me in when I was there is that all these case files that I used to investigate, give it to labor relations and anti-corruption, they used to lose those cases. So I said to them, you know what, I'm going to prosecute my cases now. So I went to my director, said, talk to the DG. I know the mandate of labor relations reside with HR, but I want to do my cases. Then I started doing my cases. That's when PSA identified me, because majority of the members that I was prosecuting were members of the PSA. And it was fair. These were corrupt individuals within the system. Then the PSA then offered me a job to say that, look, come work for us. Because they were starting to lose members because they were losing most of their cases with me. That's when I then became the PSA employee. Then I worked for PSA for 16 years. I grew through the ranks from an entry level to the deputy general manager of the organization. But whatever I experienced in NUPSO, then I started experiencing in the PSA, where the leaders of the PSA approached me to do things that I hate, and I refused. The current president, for instance, wanted me to give him a job in the PSA. I refused. I said, but you don't have the experience nor the prerequisite to come in. Yes, you are a president, you were elected. I don't know how you were elected. It's fine. But we have a set of employees who are working their butts off in the organization, who have been growing through the ranks, and we cannot cut off their careers because of you are our leader. Then they came after me. And that's how I parted ways with a PSA. Then I decided, you know what, let me just rather go back into business and do something for because this thing is not working out for me. Then I went to see my teacher, Sheikh Fadlala Khairi, one day, and I told him that, you know, Sheikh, this is what I'm going through. I'm exhausted. I think I should take a different path. I've done my best as an activist, and I'm going to continue doing it. In any case, we're doing a lot of community work with Rahim and the Gauteng Muslim Shura Council, and I can still serve. Then he looked at me and said to me, if you leave this, you are going to have a miserable life. That was
because this is not following your passion,
he says you are going to have
purpose.
A miserable life. It's your choice. And I said, now with this, what am I going to do? That's when now I said, you know what, I'm going back. Now I was approached by a number of people to say that, you know what, they are not happy with the current trade union system. It's run, you know, the thuggery in the trade union business is more than what you see in the government. A lot of people don't understand that unions are becoming cults run by leaders who are greedy, who are just looking after their pockets and all. In the trade union movement is so prominent, and most workers don't know that.
You can think of the money that the guys have access to.
It's a lot of money. Most of these unions, they've got the so-called investment companies. Ask yourself, where is that money going? Because of either no worker that I know that gets dividends from those companies. But the leaders are becoming millionaires. So this is where the problem is with the current leaders. And that is why they are unable to really represent workers as they should be. Because the state and the police, some of them, they know what they are doing. And they always remind them that if you don't do this, this is your end result. That is why you see most of the previously powerful unions have become so weak because they put them on the boards. I mean, look at the mining unions. They sit on these boards. They've got shares in the mines and all that. How do you represent a worker with money in your mouth coming in? You're conflicted.
We don't have to think too far. We actually have the greatest example, not to say that there's corruption, but the president of our country was a unionist.
Exactly.
Who then got into mainstream business and made billions.
Yes.
I mean, forget about the fact that
Where the Mantashe, same situation.
Same
and there's a lot of them who are sitting in money.
Bobby Gottsell, I think he was also a unionist, right?
All
Today
of them.
he's one of the billionaires.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
So okay. So we've already come to the end of this segment. You know, we can go. I think we should actually have a show on just the union and those aspects, which I think is something to discuss. What comes out again very, very strongly for me, and this is a lesson, is that, you know, you've always been on the side of justice, always been on the side of, as much as you can, where you've seen corruption, where you've seen dishonesty, is then fighting against that system. Again, a very powerful lesson, because for many of us, you're in a situation, you're in a comfy situation, there's money flowing, you might as well just overlook it and just carry on and do what you need to do. Say the system is based like that. A lot of us do that. But what you're saying is, when I see injustice, my natural inclination is to fight it. And that is a very, very, very powerful lesson. And something that I think we need more of in this country today, in the world today, to fight this injustice that's in the world we live in. Let's explore this and some of the practical work that you're going to do now in terms of fighting this injustice after the break. Welcome back to Inspirate Business, and we have been educated in this last 3 segments by Brother Tahir, Muhammad Maepa, a beautiful journey, an amazing journey of an example of someone who stands for social justice and somebody that goes against the grain, right from the struggle credentials reared by the principles of the great Robert Sobukwe, principles that were espoused through the journey of coming into Islam. And what attracted him to Islam was this aspect of justice, and got involved and created organizations that were very successful. But again, when confronted with the ills of injustices, stood up against it, much to his detriment, I can imagine, where you then kind of lost a lot of hope. But then through his spiritual mentor, guided to say that your purpose and what your role was on this earth is to be there to fight this aspect of injustice. And therein, for me personally, is such a lesson, is so inspiring, because we all face our own demons every day, and you sometimes feel maybe it's easier to go, a different road. And I guess the road less traveled is the one that why we were put on this earth for, and all have to follow our own purpose. Now, this purpose has brought you now to a new union, a fairly new union. Since COVID, I think in the last 2 years, you've created what is called the Public Service
and Commercial Union.
Right? PSCU.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that and what it intends to do differently.
Yeah. Now, like I said, then I was approached by workers in firstly, it was the financial sector. They say, you know what, the financial sector is a very messed up sector, and workers don't have a voice. Can't you start something? Now, financial sector is very difficult. The banks, for instance, they've sorted out for themselves, and they made sure that they don't allow any union to ever come into that space. There's one union that you can't distinguish it from the bank. It's like the same thing. And if you look at the financial sector over the years, it's one of those sectors that it has shed more jobs than any other sector. And they are not being challenged because these are bullies. These, I call them gangsters in suits. They do as they wish. And that came about when we marched here in Sandton against, we had a campaign called Racist Banks Must Fall, where there is this discriminatory practice by the banks, where we as people of color are treated differently from the white people. We are given different interest rates. When you lend money, you pay more than all those kinds of things. And those things are recorded, they are known. And we then had this campaign, and we had a big march to FNB here in Sandton. And that's when we were approached, say, but guys, can't you come into the sector? Then I spoke to a few people and in the academia now, because I've built a very solid network. And I said, but if we are going to have a trade union that is going to be different, what model can we use for us to have a success? Because our purpose is to change the status quo and to bring about equity, and fairness, where workers will have a say into their affairs and destroy this cult leadership that we are currently having in the country. This is what kills the ANC, that killed the PAC, that killed most of the organizations, and where a leader is being put above the organization. I don't want to be that kind of a leader. I'm a servant leader.
Yes.
I serve.
And that's the prophetic model.
Yes. And a privilege is leadership. Now, I spoke to a number of people, and somebody said to me, you know what? You need to combine commercial and public service. Because what happens in the commercial sector affects what's happening in the public service.
Or hence the public service commercial
union.
Okay, all right.
You understand? So, for instance, I'm not sure if you are aware that, almost 70% of public servants can't afford houses.
That's staggering, man.
Yes, they can't afford because they are working. They have to go to the banks to get loans. They can't get loans, and they can't afford to have RDP because of their working.
And you would think that the banks, this is a guaranteed...
No, it's not. It is not. And this market of the bank is so cruel that even if you do, you pay an arm and a leg for you to be able to do that. And if you miss payments, that house is gone. And the majority of the victims are black workers. I mean, that is a fact. Now, how are we going to influence policy making in the commercial sector if we are not there? We need to go in the commercial sector, the financial sector, and break down the monopoly and the stranglehold that the banks and the financial sector has on this union that is less of a union than the servant of this banking sector. So that we can then say, when we change policy in the public service, these guys don't push back, but they have their own politicians. I mean, Cyril Ramaphosa came during the Zondo Commission. He said there was a push to have a commission of inquiry into banking. I stopped it. You can go into those records. Why is so scared to go into
the banking
industry?
Because that will open another whole can of worms.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he will be swallowed into it as well. So he stopped it as an individual, despite the fact it's in the interest of this country that the banks, the rot and the corruption in the banks need to be dealt with. But he stopped it. But we don't know for how long he'll hold on, because it will have to come because of there's a lot of injustice that is done by the banking sector. But this is where PSU is coming from. We are not just going to be a union, but we are a 360-degree holistic union where we look after their members and their families. Because one of the things, for instance, there was, that there was a strike or a protest in the public service for salaries.
Yes.
And my former union said they're going to close borders and all that because they thought they still have the majority in the immigration. But I have the majority in the immigration sector now. And I said to my members, we are not going to go on strike. First and foremost, the timing is wrong. It's completely wrong. Secondly, we are not going to disturb our children from writing their matric exams. And I was so happy that SATU and the other teachers' union like NAPTOSA agreed also not to go on the strike, because this is one of the most irresponsible things that could have been done at this timing point. Not only for our children, but also for the workers themselves. Because if you go on strike now, your no pay deduction is going to happen in December, where you need money in order for your children's January schooling. It's so irresponsible. One of the basic principles in trade union, the timing of a strike is critical. You should be able to know that. But you can see is that cult leadership that I'm talking about.
It's all about myself.
Ego. Yes. It's not about how is this going to affect my member financially and the family of my member who's a child who's supposed to be writing exams. And I said, as unions, we need to be responsible. Yes, we are going to deal with employers mercilessly. However, we need to also understand that we're in a country that is in a crisis. This country lends about 1.2 billion every day to service the debt. Who's going to pay that debt? Is me and you, because of government's only source of income is taxes.
Yes.
So we are going to be taxed to death in order to, and this is generational curse. The effect of what Ramaphosa's government is doing is going to be felt by the generations to come. And if we are not going to stop it, they will not have a country. For now, it's still okay because every day people wake up, they go and buy a loaf of bread. There's a loaf of bread. But very soon, there won't be a loaf of bread if we don't stop what is happening now. Corruption is one thing. These international agreements that are being signed, they are binding us for generations to come.
We become indebted to the rest of the world.
To the world. We are basically modern day slaves. And we can't get out of it if we don't stop it now. And this is where PSCU is coming from. We are saying that we are going to be a 360-degree kind of a union that we're going to look after the interests of our members, our families, and the nation at large. Because whatever political decisions that are taken have an impact on us as a people. And that is why I said, and a lot of people criticize me because I've always been a person who's saying that I need to be apolitical. I don't want to but why should not I be involved in politics that decides about my future? And I said to my members and my NEC, we need to start having a situation where the best among us workers, they must start contesting to be legislators.
Of course, that's where you can make an impact.
That's where you can make an impact. Because this thing of saying that politics, we must leave it to these guys, the current guys, who are less than, I don't want to use certain words, but it's these people don't have a clue what they are doing. We are surrendering our future into the hands of people who knows what.
And who care only about their
care only about their own self and their masters. So we need to start saying that workers and the best amongst us, they must go in and contest these elections as independents so that we can have people within legislators, different legislators to say that if we have issues about a law, for instance, we have a problem with the banks, we have somebody that we can lobby, say that, put this thing for this guy. Currently, who do you have? We have no one. You can't trust ANC, you can't trust DA because of most of their funding comes from the very same enemies that we are fighting.
And that same system that you talk about, this whole banking system,
are there too,
which is a network that's linked right through to international players.
Of course.
Because it's all one. So what I'm hearing you saying is actually the PSCU is actually, in principally, besides just being a union, and you say the 360, is actually challenging the status quo. It's a whole paradigm shift.
Yes.
The system needs to change. To actually, that's where, when you change that system, and it fundamentally, and we can do this in South Africa, if we challenge here, it can have a ripple effect on the rest of the world. And I think that's the power South Africa has. Look, we've already come to the end of the show. We could have spoken so much more. I think we just got warmed up right at the end. We may have to do another show just on this year. I see you have something from the PSCU, and maybe we can just see the logo. And
yes, this is just a gift for you for inviting us to be part of this. It's part of our material.
Shukran,
and I see that you go to the gym a lot, and you do. So I have a cap for you.
Okay,
that you can wear.
And I need to sometimes, we with the lesser hair, it's good to wear the cap. Yeah. So this is the PS. Okay, that's the Public Service and Commercial Union of South Africa.
Yes.
If they guys want to get involved, where do they?
We on social media, on our website, just say PSCUSA, then you'll find us.
Okay, all right. Yeah. So I think I will start to be the first one to join now.
There you go.
It also matches my outfit and everything.
And it goes very well.
Right. So great, alhamdulillah. But great work that you're doing, my brother, and keep up the work. I think it's something that needs to be done. we have to be challenging this paradigm. And here's somebody that's doing something very practical and on the side of justice. We really need some changes in the system that we were operating in. I don't think this world that we operate in can continue with the way it is, where it creates such large divides.
No.
And things need to be different. So inshallah, we wish you all the best with the work that you're doing. And we love to have you on for another show, maybe where we can just discuss purely this year and have discussions around it, and maybe go a little bit more deeper into it. But thank you for your time, and we hope you as a viewer have enjoyed this enlightening and educational last hour of this beautiful journey of Brother Tahir, on the side of justice, seeing an issue growing up as a Christian and saying, but how come this religion is for one and not the other? And then finds Islam. Allah has His way of connecting him through some work that the late Ahmad Didat has done, and then the Sheikh from Pretoria, and then getting on the side and always challenging the paradigm, the status quo. And today he's doing this now on a countrywide level, challenging this banking system, the financial system, linking it up to the public service as well. So on that light, we say shukran, and we wish to see you on many other shows. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.